Should be able to hear me. Should be live.
Yep, great. Sorry. Okay, welcome to the CTC meeting for the Node Foundation on the 13th of July 2016. Today we have Miles Barnes, who's here as an observer. He's been invited for these meetings just to connect the dots with LTS. We also have Anna Henningsen. Sorry, Anna, I'm trying to find you. Yep, who's joining us as a part of the nomination process for joining the CTC. So welcome, two of you. And let's just roll straight into the meeting. What have we got? We're going to do a quick stand-up. We're going to try and keep it fairly quick today. See if we can get through this in a few minutes. Anna, you're first.
Just PRs and issues and some of the larger 4.x backports.
Next up is Bradley.
Got bad news from V8 and Chakra. One of the things we wanted to do for modules, property hoisting, can't really be supported. Looking into what we can do instead. So.
Next is Ben.
Backporting patches like almost everyone else. I'm working on a fairly large refactor of moving away from malloc to operator new to smooth over a couple of platform issues. Still working on this ABI compatibility tool to get ABI changes in releases and minor other things. I think Colin is next.
Yeah, just the usual reviewing issues and pull requests. Opened a few pull requests. Next is Evan.
Yeah, I had a simple doc fix, and then been working on cherry picking stuff into V6. Next is Jeremiah.
Hey, I fixed a TDY test that was silently failing for over a year, and also did some other miscellaneous PR and issue work. The next is Fedora.
Hi, I worked on some Jeep-related tooling and fixed some bugs and did some code reviews. Next is Josh.
Yeah, I've been updating some of the debugging docs in a couple places, and was getting together the diagnostics working group meeting, which we just had today. Next is Michael Dawson.
I added Linux 1 to the V8 tests in the CI, opened the related issues, some involvement on AIX issues, working with Ian on the ABI stable API and getting ready for the API working group meeting this week, and involvement in some of the other working group meetings, and then just miscellaneous reviews and lands and so forth. Next is Brian.
Okay, I worked on a PR that checks for git conflict markers when you lint and CI'd. I also worked on backporting a few commits back to the v4.x branch. And then also just the usual reviewing PRs and issues. Next is Ali.
Yeah, I was on vacation, so I'm just fighting with email at the moment. Next is Alexis.
Yes, I've been investigating ABI incompatibilities related to drop-in support for VS 2013 and moving to 2015 for releases. Reviewed miscellaneous Windows issues, and I resumed work on a PR for case normalization for the module cache on Windows. Next is Rod.
The most interesting thing I did was a rework of the LTS README. Probably bring that to this meeting in a couple of weeks. Next is Miles.
I got the release candidate for v4.5.0 out and got a whole bunch of people to help with backporting, working on some enhancements to Canary in the Goldmine that should see it moving a lot faster and also being parsed quicker, which should help with some of the Jenkins problems we've been having. And then also helped organize a meeting with the V8 team to improve the workflow for floating patches on LTS. And next is Trevor.
have a working fix for one of the real path bugs. I need to clean that up, and I think it's ready to land. And then backporting, a couple things before, and working on some of the async wrap EP implementation details. Richard, is Richard next?
Yes, I am next. I'm trying to handle a flaky test outbreak on FreeBSD, although it looks like it might be an infra-related problem that's easily solved. So that's exciting. Various ESLint updates and improvements, yay, and banging my head against a long-standing V8 tick processor test that's non-deterministic that fails occasionally. So, and we didn't miss anybody, it doesn't look like, so I guess we're on to the agenda now.
Yeah, so yeah, we've got a few items today. I think we can roll through most of them fairly quickly. Just quickly on the previous meetings agenda, if anything here stands out worthy of comment, please do so, otherwise we'll move on. So we talked about, well, I wasn't here, so it was talked about dropping Visual Studio 2013 support in V7, and I believe that's on the agenda again. Real path changes is on the agenda again. And then the unambiguous JavaScript grammar thing for ES modules was accepted and merged. Async wrap public API was accepted and merged into EP as well. No comments on those final two. Nope, we'll move on. So the continuation of last week's dropping support for Visual Studio 2013 in Node version 7. So I wasn't here for the meeting last week. What do we have to cover here? Who wants to take this one?
I can take this one. So the decision to drop support for VS 2013 in V7 doesn't seem controversial. We need to prepare some release machines so we can do releases with 2015, and also add tests to the matrix to test modules built with 2013 with Node built for 2015. Joao is currently taking care of that. The work is under control. The remaining questions were whether we would drop support for V6, and there is potential breaking change. So it turns out that the issue affecting Node SAS, which is a known ABI incompatibility across compiler versions, only affects Windows XP. So since we don't support XP, that's encouraging, and it's the only one that we were aware of. So I had a chat with the Visual C++ team, and as Ben suggested, most of the issues are with CRT allocating memory from one module and frame and the other module is a no-no, or the STL is always broken between compiler versions. When it comes to C++, obviously the compiler tries to maintain compatibility, although there are some corner cases. And at this point, the best way there's no way to be sure of how people are using it out there. So the best way to gain some confidence is to do some testing. So I was wondering if I could get some input from Miles, if Canary in the Gold Mine would provide good coverage for native modules, and from the rest of the group, if passing that would be good enough criteria to drop support in V6.
So we'd have to make some changes, at least in CI, to see how that would work for Canary in the Gold Mine, because it's installing all the modules each run. So what we would really want to do is we'd want to run the install with the original version and then run the test suite with the new version and see, if there's any breakages. I could look into what it would take to get something like that working. I'm actually kind of curious if this would overlap with some of the research that Ben has been doing.
It's actually exactly the same as stuff that I wanted to do on that front. I think Ben's going to do some inspection of binaries, but the actually compatibility testing for add-ons, yeah, that's exactly the same thing. So if that worked for Canary in the Gold Mine, then that would cover our case for upgrading ABI. Well, cover the particular case that I was interested in, not the one that Ben was interested in.
So I could look at making another Canary in the Goldmine Jenkins job. I kind of have a idea of how that could be handled. It would be slow as hell, but I think that I can maybe get something off the ground for that. So I can try breaking ground on that this week.
Yeah, we could even do a single pass locally, even without doing an CI, just to validate whether this is a good idea or not. But do you think it provides good coverage for native modules?
I think that if we were to go ahead, we would probably want to do a call and get a whole group of native modules in there. There are some native modules that we have, but I don't think that that list is currently extensive.
Is it possible that this may cause issues with Node pre-jip?
That's really what we're trying to test here.
Yeah, it's possible that it would cause issues with any native module. So definitely with the ones built with Node.js.
Okay, yeah, I'm just saying we might want to make sure there's some that are pre-jipped in there.
Yeah, so we will never get 100% confidence that this is not a breaking change. But the fact that no SAS is the only issue that was ever reported is encouraging that probably there are not many gotchas out there in use.
Miles, do we have Node SAS in Canary in the Goldmine? Because we see issues raised from that so regularly.
Don't believe so, but I can double check, and if it's not, I can get a pull request in to get it in there.
Hopefully Rod is okay.
Sorry, I'm choking on my own water.
So we do not have Node SAS in there, but I can get it in there.
I think that'd be good because even yesterday there was an issue being dealt with on Electron that was covering Node SAS. It just pops up all the time. Okay. Anything else on this before we move on? Or can we make a decision, or there's no decision here, is there?
I guess based on the test findings, we can make a decision. On the third point, whether we should drop support for modules built with VS 2013, I think my recommendation would be against that and to try to support them until we're really forced by V8 to drop support.
So continuing to support that would mean doing a compile with 2013 and then a test run with 2000 or at least the test run of the add-ons, the add-ons test with 2013.
The other way around.
Oh, sorry, the other way around. Yeah. Are we prepared to add that into our CI mix? I guess we're already set up for compiling on one machine and testing on another, aren't we?
Yeah, we need to add a node in the matrix, but the change is definitely doable.
I forget offhand, what was the issue that caused us to investigate this in the first place? The link is wrong in the README. Sorry, in the doc.
So Ben opened this issue, citing many C++ 11 incompatibilities in VS 2013 that are requiring us to implement hacks in the code base. I just took his word on this. I didn't verify whether there are workarounds. That's also something that I could do. Ben, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's issue 7484. I'll paste the link in the chat.
Okay, let's move on. Real path changes. I guess we'll cover. We'll leave this on the agenda and we'll come back to it next week and see if we've made any progress. Real path behavior changes. Trevor, have we made any progress on this?
far as the deep circling issue, yeah, that's solved. It's in my PR, but there's still a Windows issue where with symlinking across drives or network drives that causes it to resolve incorrectly. That's in another PR. Basically, it just re-implements the old JavaScript API to solve that. I feel like it could be simplified some, and I know Saul is working on a libuv fix. And until then, we might just have to suck it up and use the old JavaScript API for that case. But we still should be able to use the libuv real path for all other cases.
So I note that Saul was throwing his hands up at Windows errors during the week. I'm just wondering where this puts us if libuv can't solve the Windows problems, which was more than just eloop. It was a bunch of other things. Where we go from there. Is anybody up to speed on that, or was it just me seeing ghosts?
Yes, there is a PR meant to address the Windows issues. That's the one that Trevor was mentioning.
Is that making progress, or is it stalling out?
Well, I think the concern is that it's bringing back most of the JS implementation just to handle this Windows corner cases. And people would prefer to see a modification in C++. But Bartosz has been working on this. I didn't have a chance to review in detail, but he seems to think that this is the best way forward.
I think it'd probably be better to have something sooner rather than later, so I don't really mind bringing back a bunch of the JS implementation. It didn't look too big, to be honest, so.
Someone got a issue number for that PR?
Posted that in the chat.
Cool, thank you. 7559. Okay. Yeah, but this is hanging on for a long time. We really should try and progress here, even if it means reverting. But let's try and get as much attention as we can on Trevor's pull request and on the Windows proposal during the week, and then revisit it again next week.
Well, Rod, bringing back the JavaScript implementation doesn't mean we have to completely remove the new implementation. There's only a subset of cases where libuv's real path fails. And in those cases, we just default back to the JavaScript implementation. In all others, we can keep the new implementation.
Yeah. Is it really worth it for a little speed up?
This patch honestly has been like over a year coming, and it's not a little speed up. It's like over an order of magnitude. And what's her name? She was Broccoli. She's actually the original reason why this even came up is because she was having to stat a huge number of files, and it's causing a big performance gap in her library. And so this speed up was put in to help with that case.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just that like it's a speed up for a certain case, but how common is that case in general applications?
Well, what I prefer we do is keep both the C++ and the JavaScript implementation with the objective to take out the old JavaScript code, right? I feel like it'd be kind of silly to like remove one completely, add the other, then remove it and re-add the other. It still hasn't been decided whether if the Windows thing 100% cannot be solved, like for sure cannot be solved, fine, whatever. But that's still not the case.
Okay, so Trevor, pull request number 7548. That's the one we're supposed to put our eyes on. Is that correct?
That Is that mine?
Yeah.
Or is that? Yeah, that one. All test passed. That one should be ready to go.
Okay. So
For needing
eyes on
some
that.
cleanup.
And then, okay, we'll revisit next week. Okay, moving on.
Just sorry to interrupt quickly before you go. 7192 is another one worth looking at. Saul had written recently about digging into the network drive problem and having real issues with figuring out how to solve that. So that's probably worth putting eyes on as well.
That's probably the one I was thinking of where he commented.
I just pasted it in the chat.
Okay, moving on. The next issue is 6102, which is inheriting from object prototype for the headers storage object. Brian, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. Okay. So this, for people that don't already know, this is just about preventing lowercase header names from clashing with properties that are inherited from the object prototype, like underscore underscore proto underscore underscore. In particular, my original solution, or the current solution, really is just to use the null prototype and just have that be the end of it. This is the solution we're already using for query string parsing since the original V6 release. One alternate solution to this was it was suggested to cherry pick at least one of the properties from the object prototype and to stick that, like specifically like toString, for example, and to stick that on the object. My argument against that was that I personally think it should just be like an all or nothing thing to prevent, like possible issues with like duck typing and people saying, oh, look, there's a, toString's working, so I'll try has own property, that should be working too, and all these other methods that are inherited. And then there was kind of like an alternate solution, which is we had discussed cherry picking toString, but making it possibly print like a deprecation message. And if we're going to do that, I wasn't quite sure how we wanted to, as far as the timeline for doing something like that, if we wanted to do a hard deprecation like sooner, or if we wanted to go through like a dock deprecation and follow through that kind of trajectory or whatever. And there was also some discussion about, if we eventually want to transition to using an ES6 map instead of just a plain object as the backing store. Obviously, that's going to be probably a significant change because the API is just completely different as far as accessing and setting properties and all that kind of stuff. And also, as Rod had showed, he has a PR that shows the ES6 maps seem to be, if the benchmark is correct, that they seem to be faster than just plain objects for storing values. So recent versions of V8. So basically, we need to, I guess, find out what we think is the best solution, at least for the time being. Whatever the plans may be for when V6 goes into LTS or for V7 or whatever. So yeah, that's basically the gist of it.
A couple things. I think we should be extra careful of maps. When I did a lot of testing on timers, that was a little bit ago, but they were definitely not faster unless you were deleting a lot of properties. But many applications do not specifically use the delete operator on such objects, so you do not incur those sort of performance penalties. The other thing is switching it to a map is, it might be an underscored property, but it is wildly used in userland, and I don't think that would at all be possible. I think at this point I'd generally be for just making it a null prototyped object in a major.
Quick side question is double underscore proto, is that even a valid header?
I think it is, because I think well, see, I take that back. I think that there was an issue sometime back. I can't remember if it was in time for V4 or if it was IOJS at the time. There was an issue where somebody was sending a header name with the name constructor or something like that, I think, and I had to actually tweak the check when the header names are set so that it makes sure that it doesn't try to override a function, I think, or something, because that was causing a similar issue. So
yeah, it's kind of like a security issue.
What's the method that, like, is it two strings specifically they want?
So the problem is if you don't have toString, if you don't have value of those two specifically, so if you don't have toString, trying to log it out to anywhere is basically impossible if you don't know about it. You don't have value of, you can't concat it to anything.
Oh, that's not true. You can use the symbol properties. I think it's like too primitive or something like that.
Are you sure a null object has those?
Well, what I was saying is you can, in order to allow easier.
But the issue here is it's not about what you can do in the future code. It's what people are doing today. So this is a matter of compatibility with the ecosystem.
Something we could do, since, I mean, one thing we could do is we could make util.format check if something has the doesn't have a toString, if it doesn't already check for that, because then we can just use object toString. That might help mitigate some of the problem of people like trying to log out headers when they're trying to like look at stuff or stuff like that.
Are we going down a rabbit hole we shouldn't be going down in this meeting? Is this like what were we hoping to get out of this conversation? We weren't. Were we gonna try to figure out the implementation?
It's kind of been stuck around for a long time.
Yeah, this is a bit of a rabbit hole, but getting more awareness of this amongst the CTC would be helpful because there's multiple ways forward, and we sort of need to pick one and be comfortable with it. And so far, the level of comfort has not been great.
It sounds kind of like modules, all options stuck, but we just need to choose one.
A little bit like that.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like I said, I personally just would rather just follow what we did for query string parsing and just do null prototype and that's it. No cherry picking or anything like that. But
I second
that's
that.
my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Look, I support that too, but just before we go like fully commit to that, I recommend that you have a look at the thread in that issue. There is some arguments against that, particularly from Jordan Harband, who's TC39. So go to that thread, have a look, weigh in. If we need to bring it back for a vote again, Brian, let's do it next week. But for now, back to GitHub. Please go and weigh in if you find this discussion interesting. Okay, next one is actually James's, which is the WG standard for URL for URL, which is in the EP repo pull request number 28. Do we have anyone that wants to talk about this, or should we wait for next week when James is back?
I have a brief thing to mention. Oh, somebody else?
No, go on.
So it seemed like there was conflict about adding support for schemes that aren't listed in the WG's URL, and Dominic specifically said he didn't think that was a good idea, but I mean, even Chrome does it. If you pass the Chrome Dash extension scheme, it has its own way of parsing that. So I honestly, in my opinion, adding support for specific schemes is a non-issue. We should be able to add those without worrying about it. There is a slight difference in functionality I didn't realize till today, which is URL parse supported partials. For example, no scheme, where new URL will throw if you don't pass the scheme with the URL. So honestly, like URL parse is more like a URI parse because it doesn't require all parts of the URL to be there. But that being said, I'm okay going forward with it. We just need to make an agreement on points like the scheme support.
I think the most contentious part of this is where it would live, because the proposal is not to remove or replace the current implementation, but is to add a new thing. And so there's multiple options. And even though the doc says hanging it off the URL module as all caps URL, there's also discussion there about making it a global. That I think is the most important thing that we need to. It's the most important hurdle to jump first. We have comfort level for having 2 URL implementations.
Yeah, good point.
Didn't we talk about something really similar to this in terms of like the HTTP parser, the DNS logic and stuff like that? At the time, the discussion was, well, since we didn't want to have 2 implementations forever, was to use a flag to ease in, and then also use a flag to ease out the people that still needed the old implementation later down the road. So it'd be around for a while, but not forever.
Do we plan on removing the URL module?
I think the functionality would be replaced, is what I'm suggesting.
I think one of the big differences there is that the implementations were made to be like API compatible, whereas I don't think this one is, like with what Trevor was saying.
Yeah, I believe there's a lot here that's different to our URL module, so I think it would be quite painful, potentially. I would love to see a delta between the WG URL and ours. I don't think we have that yet. But my impression from James is that he doesn't even think it's practical to migrate. It's more about offering 2 and letting people choose, and then hopefully migrating people that way.
Yeah, we have pretty extensive support. Like our test suite has a huge number of URLs, and I feel like copy that over and do a grep replace and just see how that thing compares. That wouldn't be too hard.
Okay, let's put this off until next week, but please go in and have a look at that EP and consider that thing about having 2 implementations. Last thing on the agenda is Miles. We put this one on just recently, within the last few hours. Issue number 7688, which is pull request for version 4.5.0. So release candidates are already rolling out, but Miles wanted to raise awareness here. Do you want to tell us, Miles, what you'd like from us?
Yeah, sure thing. So the 4.5 proposal includes, a bunch of Semver minor commits and, a whole bunch of other stuff. I think we're up to almost 250 plus commits at this point. So one of the biggest changes that we're seeing in there right now is the inclusion of libuv 1.9.1. So I think the intention is that we want to ship with that. It would be really great, especially for like security and backporting purposes, to be on a more modern libuv. But with the number of different edge cases and problems that we felt with the upgrade in 6, even though most of them were based around, like the real path implementation, which we are not backporting, we're just backporting the upgrade to libuv. There were other issues like the STD out issues on OS X, and I'm not even sure that I know all the different things that came up. But what that means is that we want to have very extensive testing of the RCs before we do an official release. And if anything comes up, we're prepared to back those out of the release and kind of renegotiate a discussion with libuv as far as like what we're going to be doing on the v4 LTS. Preferable not to have to do that, but so the biggest question is like, who are the stakeholders who we should be calling on for this? What can we do other than canary in the gold mine for some robust testing? Because most of the problems that we ran into in v6 were not caught by canary in the gold mine. So I'll leave this to the floor now for people to make some suggestions.
My suggestion in the meeting 6 hours ago was we'll have a new release candidate cut soon, and then to have some heavy promotion around that of that on the various social channels that we're all connected to. So maybe just have everyone here tuning into that release and going out and promoting people testing it. Beyond that, I've got nothing.
Yeah, so one thing that I wanted to make sure that we did was clear communication to NPM and to try to get this into their test workflow, whatever that is. A lot of these problems were a rude awakening to NPM, maybe even like 3 weeks or a month after the v6 release is kind of when it boiled over. My plan right now is to draft a letter to Forrest, the CLI team, and to Isaac. And if anyone wants to take a look at that before I send it over, I'm more than welcome to share a document. But that's like kind of the big thing I would love. If anyone can think of other organizations that could be majorly affected, I'd like to try to, individually reach out to people and let them know how important testing this is.
Heroku might be a good one. They seem to surface a lot of problems pretty early.
Also Travis
So
CI.
Yeah, Travis is interesting because I don't think we can actually push it as a... Oh, but they use NVM, so if we... NVM doesn't support release candidates, so I don't think there's anything we can do.
NVM's close to supporting release candidates. I think there were some testing problems that they were having with testing the builds locally that needed to get unblocked before. I can get a conversation going with LJ Harb to find out how we can maybe get that moving a little bit faster.
That would be pretty cool. Then it would enable a lot more testing. So I guess GCP, Ali, I don't know if you have a way of testing release candidates, and probably also IBM, the stuff that you're doing with Bluemix. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think I can get it into Bluemix. I will ask that we try and build it and get it through our internal flows.
Is it going to be in a community build pack that we could test that way?
The release candidates are available on nodejs.com/download/rc. So it's available from the same download site as our other releases. You can actually get it working in NVM by just changing an environment variable, and I can share the information on how to do that if people are interested in getting a little bit hackier with it.
Well, I guess if it's in a Heroku community build pack.
Oh, okay.
If it's in a Cloud Foundry. If it's in a Cloud Foundry community build pack, you could test it on Bluemix and other Cloud Foundry-based environments.
Let's reach out to Hunter Loftus. Maybe Miles, do you want to take that? Do you have a relationship with Hunter?
I do not. That's
okay.
Over at Heroku, or is?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's pretty responsive to this kind of thing. So getting his thoughts on how to validate it might be helpful, and maybe he can do a build pack or something.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, so that was mainly an awareness thing. So Miles will ping everyone, just ping the collaborators when you do an RC, and we'll get some testing done. Or the next RC anyway. Any other public business before we move on to Q&A? No. Okay, so sorry?
There is one thing, just like I mentioned in stand-up. For modules, we're going to have to rethink some things just because we got back from VM implementation. We can't get hoisting, so named imports on CommonJS modules just can't be supported by the VMs for a variety of reasons. So we're going to need to figure out a solution to that. But it just means that we will have major breakage whenever we do implement ES modules, which we weren't expecting to have such a big problem.
By that you mean like replacing module.exports equals function, and then you just require it and it gives you a function? Is that what you mean?
No, so like if I'm using Babel, I can do import read file from FS, and that works. What that's doing is something either called plucking or hoisting, depending upon specific things. Basically, it's doing property access. And there's some code generation problems and some optimization problems that the VMs face when doing that. So it would basically mean any usage of a imported variable would need to be guarded during code gen, which would cause deops. And so that's just not something can be done. There are also some other problems with expectations on how variables are stored. So we basically just can't do that. So you won't be able to import read file from FS. You'll have to import FS from FS and then manually pull the property off.
Unless we export from core.
We can't export from core anytime soon. Like next 4 years soon.
I thought that was even part of the spec, the named imports.
So like I can import, you can import anything that's an identifier that's been marked for export. So the way that the module spec works in reality is it's giving direct access to the module's scope, and it's giving access to anything that's been flagged for export. So export is more like a Boolean flag saying this variable is available for other people than saying I want to store it on an object.
Remember when they said that this was going to be compatible with Node when they first proposed it? Just going to burn it all down. So, what are there next steps there, Bradley, or is it just you're just telling us that this is just not going to happen?
Well, there's that, and then this has an interesting thing because we're going to use plucking to get transitivity to work. So if you have an ES6 module that's re-exported by a CommonJS module and then loaded into an ES6 or vice versa, CJS to ES to CJS, we want it to maintain the exact same shape even though it's gone through the other module system. As a result of things uncovered during implementation problems while they were looking at it, we actually have to figure out some way to fix that problem. which could be done if we could do hoisting, but we can't do hoisting, so I've got to figure out some way to do it. And it'll probably be something like put a frozen object into a weak map somewhere if you need something to be in a different mode, which sounds really weird, but I haven't fully figured it out yet.
So more next week, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much for keeping us in the loop on that, Bradley. That's really helpful, even though it's very painful for everybody.
Yeah, and if there's a good current summary of the things you just described, so that those of us who need to read these things to fully grok them can read something. I don't know if that exists, but if it does, if you could drop that link in the minutes or something, that would be really helpful to me.
I'll do that.
Okay, we don't have much time left, but Q&A from the people listening in on the live stream. If you want to leave comments on YouTube and or IRC and or the issue for this meeting, please do so now. We might pause for a minute or so to let that come in, unless there's anything pending, Jeremiah or anyone else.
Nothing pending. There's apparently 3 people watching. I did solicit for questions already, as usual.
Okay, let's wrap up now. We have a fantastic new section at the end here. I think, Josh, you're responsible for this. Upcoming meetings. So the next CTC meeting is on the 20th of this month. The TSC meeting is tomorrow. You can tune into that. Therell be an issue on the TSC repo a bit later today. Diagnostics working group meeting has the next meeting next month on the 3rd. Postmortem has one on the 18th, so that's next week. API working group tomorrow. LTS working group in 2 weeks. And the build working group next week on the 19th. So that each of those issues will show up on for those meetings will show up on those various repositories. And if you have suggestions for making that more accessible, please do so. I think on the TSC repo there's a section, a thing in there about meeting calendar. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for everyone for joining. And we might have a quick private section after this. But yeah, ta-ta for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.